Hey there, welcome to GSPN. You may notice there was no Monday Gyro Step this week. That's because Rohan Kadi's a world traveler and doesn't have time for us mere mortals in Bucksland anymore. I'm Ty Windisch, joined by Adam McGee, also a world traveler, but one who made time for us, and Jordan Treske of the Win in Six podcast, here to talk about honestly, I feel like we haven't really had a week without a bunch of Bucks news at this point. It's got to slow down at some point, although we're getting close to the draft now. Maybe it just won't. Maybe that's the NBA now. We'll see. But Adam, Jordan, fellas, how's it going?
It's going well, Ty. Great to be here with you.
Regional traveler checking in here. Yeah, more Bucks news. The draft will probably be the quietest it will be for the Bucks because they have the last pick.
How long are they going to wait to sell that thing is my question. How long do we have to pretend like they're going to use that pick?
I don't know. Maybe they move it. The John Horse special. The draft starts at 7. It's 7:03. Wood tweets out, the Bucks have moved their pick to the Indiana Pacers for 3 future second rounders.
There's a good chance they're going to have to do some stuff one way or another. So some of that could play out on draft night, play out around draft night. I know that's not helpful for us in terms of being able to plan, or even for Bucks fans to really kind of zero in on the kind of players they'd like if the Bucks ended up with a pick. But I think this is kind of the reality of the Bucks offseason. It's not impossible that draft night ends up being a big night for the Bucks in a whole bunch of ways. Although, yeah, I'd be doubtful that it would be purely about where they're drafting.
Although, who knows? Maybe Adrian Griffin in town now. Maybe there'll be more players added on draft night, actually in the draft. Maybe more focus on that. We will see. TBD. I don't know what kind of pre-draft coverage we're going to have. TBD on that, too. I mean, it's really hard to scout picks at 58. We'll figure out something. But from the last week, as I mentioned, some big news to cover. I think first and foremost, Khris Middleton got surgery. That didn't happen last week. The report from Eric Naiman, Shams Charania of The Athletic, was that it happened soon after the playoffs ended. A planned procedure to address that right knee soreness that had bothered Khris pretty much all season after he was cleared for basketball activity following the wrist surgery last offseason. So Khris is slated to resume playing basketball again in July, which it's maybe longer than you would hope, but still months before the start of the next season. I think in the reporting it said this was, quote, a minor arthroscopic procedure, end quote. We don't have almost Dr. Rohan here to talk about this. So, Jordan, you're going to be our medical expert.
I've had an arthroscopy, so
okay. Well, I guess I thought it would be more fun to throw it to Jordan and just make him be
I agree. I think Jordan can do it.
Adam, I see the floor. You've had this procedure done, so therefore my stethoscope goes on the shelf.
Well, an arthroscopy is a really, really vague term, I guess. It's a general term for keyhole surgery in your knee. And
excuse me, keyhole?
Keyhole surgery, yeah.
What is that? Sorry,
that's the type of the incision is essentially
like
keyhole size. Yeah. So keyhole surgery, that's an arthroscopy.
Is this the robot? Okay. It's like the robot goes in there?
Possibly, I guess, depending on where you get it done. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't believe a robot did mine, but basically an arthroscopy doesn't give us a whole lot of information. I think the detail that tells us most of this is that it's cleanup surgery. That and the timeline would make it seem like, okay, this isn't a big deal, and maybe even it's just part and parcel of the wear and tear that Khris clearly has at this point. I would say still not great. I know, having spoken privately, you're actually kind of optimistic about this, Ty, and I get where you're coming from, but at this point, any additional procedure, any additional work, any additional time away from being in peak condition for Khris is a concern. Obviously, if you need the surgery, you need the cleanup work done, you got to get it done. But it would be so much nicer if he had just got a completely healthy off season and was able to rest up, get to work, and come back better into next season. So I don't know. I'm a little concerned just that it was required. I mean, it doesn't have to be the end of the world, but given what Khris has been through and what the Bucks have been through with him, and of course, given where we're at with his contract situation, I don't think it's the absolute ideal for either party at this point in his career.
I don't think it's better than not getting surgery, to be clear. I mean, if the report was just like, oh, his knee is actually great now, that would clearly be better. But I'm kind of glad that, versus Brook, and of course, entirely different thing, and that can't be overstated. I mean, Brook with the back for the big fella, it's a whole different conversation. I mean, this is something Khris has talked about. He's dealt with basically since the Texas A&M days, so much, much different. But the fact that he was able to play through the knee bothering him, and defensively not good, but offensively play quite well in the playoffs, right? I think, one of the more confusing things about certain people being very pro let Khris walk, which, as we've talked about a bunch, I mean, it's just not feasible to team building in the NBA to let guys walk.
What year is this comment from?
I know. Well,
because it's
been ongoing for a long.
Repeatedly repeats itself all the time.
What is this, 8 years now of let Khris walk, I think, in some way, shape, or form?
Yeah.
That
6
was
to 8 years.
Yeah.
It's just everyone. Like, if it's not Khris, it's I would have thought most Bucks fans at this point, even those who really don't care about anything cap related and they just care about the players being on the roster, not how they get there, would probably realize best route to the best Bucks team is always keeping your guys. Maybe it involves trading them down the line, but anyone walks, you're just losing that salary, and maybe now more than ever with the changes in the CBA.
Yeah, certainly. So, but I just think I think it's fine, and not like the dog in the apocalyptic fire fine. Like, I think it's actually fine. I mean, I think he's still going to have a lot of time to do the resting and ramp up of the offseason, more than he had last year when the wrist surgery kept him off the court until basically the season was starting. And I don't know. I just think I would rather them just say, you know what, this can help. Let's do it. Let's sideline him early and get the knee as right as we can with a procedure. And then we can ramp up starting in July and be sure he's ready versus, wait to get it. Suddenly it has to happen in August. If it's got to happen, I'm glad that it was a situation where they could just do it and feel good about having it done and then proceed with the rehab from there. And I'm sure some rest as well with, again, the long summer. And it sounds like Team USA is going a lot younger. So even if he was potentially going to be healthy for the FIBA World Cup, doesn't really seem like that would be on the table for Khris either way. So sure seems like he'll be off until Bucks training camp, which is fine by me. I think will be fine by Khris as well. And clearly it's something that the Bucks were on board with because he's, factoring in their coaching decisions in a way that no other player besides Giannis is, despite potentially hitting free agency. As we'll get to some other reports on other players later, all the reporting is like, yeah, he's going to be back there again. The other teams are pretty much sniffed around and found that out. So it seems like player and team are on the same page. And I would not say this is ideal, but I don't think it's a huge negative. And of course, when the news first comes out, there's this whole got to get rid of him. He's always injured. He's done. It has been a tough couple of years for Khris. You can't sugarcoat that too much. Outside of the knee thing, I think it's been largely fluky, and I would much rather bet on a Khris bounce back season than try to flip him, or certainly than to let him walk.
Yeah, I mean, where I'm at is that it didn't seem like that much of a surprise, considering his comments of dating back to, I think it was like January, December, when he was gone for however many games it was, like nearly 20 games. And he talked about how his injury that he was dealing with at the time required off-season level length of rehabilitating, trying to get back to full health and all that stuff. And so it's just been kind of this stop and start. And considering everything that we knew and kind of came to understand with his injury and just his, recovery and just, maintenance, still played as good as you could have expected, even with how the playoffs ended. But I do share some of Adam's, concern of just once you start opening up your body for surgery and stuff like that, it can go really fast. And it's not like, I don't think this is a case of you see players undergo career-ending injuries and stuff like that. This is different. This is just like it just slips little by little by little, and
almost,
you know,
Jordan, body part by body part by body part in his case, which is kind of,
yes,
it's not like Khris has a chronic knee problem or a chronic wrist problem, but he's kind of collecting, a set of surgeries in a whole variety of ways where there's a lot of little things that you can see how they're going to kind of be. They're going to be things that he could kind of pick up niggly injuries as he goes on. Like this could aggravate him over time, or that he could aggravate them quite easily. It's not just the one thing. It's not just like, oh, Chris's knee is good and that's fine. And I think it's the cumulative effect for me rather than, oh, he's got to have surgery.
Yeah, that's the thing, is that it's really like, Ty, you mentioned, like, this is our third kind of Khris Middleton injury update in the last 14 months, right? Basically since that Bulls playoff series where he slipped and missed the rest of the playoffs against the Bulls and Celtics. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. I am still very optimistic that the timing of everything like this, and just, at this point, I think it's, it obviously is to preserve and maintain what he can do. And we'll see how he responds to everything, what he looks like near the start of the season, stuff like that. But it's still overall not great that these things are starting to pile up, even if they are just small things, because that can eventually, as a snowball effect, can make a bigger thing. So, but yeah, I think if anything, I'm whelmed by the fact that this is coming very reasonably early in the offseason. So he does have some time ramping up, because that is such a key part of, his kind of recovery. And he mentioned that as much as anyone else. So I guess that's something that we can take comfort in. But overall, it is just like, it sucks that another Khris Middleton update is revolved around his long-term health and all that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it changes much about the outlook, but again, am I glad that that Khris is getting a surgery? No, I just think that it seems, I guess, logical. The exact quote from Khris, Eric Name shared it in the news piece about the surgery from mid-January was, quote, I mean, it's nothing too crazy. It's just kind of what I've dealt with every summer, ramping back up for the season, just getting my knee back accustomed to running, jumping, the force, the contact after being off for a long period of time. I know it's kind of vague, but the truth of it is that's all it was. Just the swelling and all of that, we couldn't get it to go away. My leg wasn't strong enough or conditioned enough to withstand it, end quote. My take on Khris, and I think that's why the timing of it and being back in action by July is not as concerning to me. I just think this whole season was a mess for him because of the lack of ramp up, and he made that clear. And the fact that this won't interfere with that, or at least shouldn't, is somewhat encouraging. I don't know how to to contextualize the other Khris injury stuff, because I feel like outside of the right knee, which again it seems like has been an issue for him forever, the other stuff just kind of seems random, and it doesn't seem to recur as much. I mean, the hamstring a long time ago, the left knee MCL.
Slip on a wet spot. It doesn't get more random than that for your hamstring.
Well, then the wrist injury as well that he kind of played through, and the surgery that put him out this past offseason that we didn't even know about. So I think I'd be more concerned overall with Khris injury if it was like, oh, there's that wrist again. Oh, it's that hammy acting up again. They've been kind of one-off so far outside of this right knee. So my hope is, the optimist scenario is, the surgery and the ramp-up keeps that more in check, and, don't slip. That's all you can really hope for, I guess. I don't know. I mean, it's certainly been tough, but I just don't think this has changed my outlook that much on Khris. Still very much in favor of keeping him, and it seems like the Bucks will, so that should be a good thing.
I guess the only way it factors in differently, though, to me, is that he's going to be 32 before the season starts.
Yeah.
And that is where, again, you're 100% right. There have been lots of kind of random injuries in his career, but I just worry about, as we get into these later years of his career, then, if it's a case that well, his wrist isn't quite 100%, his knee isn't quite 100%, his hamstring's not quite 100% because of just what is, they're the battle scars of life in the NBA. Like, it's part and parcel, but we can take it, and we are taking it on both sides. You could just say it's great. It's not just the one thing we're talking about, but I do wonder, do we see just kind of multiple different things lead to a slightly accelerated decline or slow down with him? That doesn't mean that's this year, but if I think, as we are expecting, he is going to return with the Bucks on a multi-year deal, something like this, while the timing is good now and hopefully it's all clear and he has a great season next year, I do think it factors into projecting forward for what's left for Khris and what's left for the Bucks with Khris. And as we well know, the Bucks' current window of contention is very likely tied to someone like Khris Middleton, because the route to extending it is not very straightforward. And even less so if he is going to be a player who is going to have injury concerns, or if there is going to be a steep decline at some point, that will only grow more challenging. So I think we're on the same page, and probably as usual, you see a bit more of the sunny side, Ty. But I think it's really just that he's about to be 32. And when you see multiple different things, it's like, well, are we going to have 3 to 4 elements that aren't going to be just quite right at the time, as opposed to when he was younger and maybe it was one? And we always hear, no one's ever 100% in the NBA, but I wonder if Chris's 100% is now getting closer to maybe an 80%, if that makes sense.
Well, just how long can you sustain it? You know what I mean? That's the thing, is that, this era of Bucks basketball is strictly defined by 3 months, and they proceed 8 months of preseason training camp, or not in that order, but preseason training camp, regular season. That's just a lot. That is a lot of stuff. And now you just add in little disruptions, whether it's surgery or just cleanup and whatever you want to call it. Like, for an older team, this is how things can kind of just start to slip away. And again, to your point, it's why Khris, every time we talk about his negotiations and people just want to let him walk, and he's not worth this much money and all that stuff, but it's like, there's not to keep repeating this point, but it has to be said, considering this keeps coming up for whatever damn reason. But he means so much to the Bucks, and I know Giannis is the straw that stirs the drink and stuff like that, but Khris Middleton is as big of a reason for why the Bucks are title winners of 2 years ago. He took them very far to the pinnacle and did everything that we saw at times and just wanted to see it at the right time. And now it's just about sustaining, or just the longevity of trying to see someone as great as Khris Middleton is, keep doing that as long as the season is going to be, because we're not going to be wanting to talk about this in April. We're going to want to be talking about this in May and June and all that stuff that, obviously the Bucks are hoping for, even with the new coaching change and stuff like that. So I don't know.
Well, I think the other interesting part of this, and we've touched on it a couple times, is the contract status too. I mean, it seems both parties are aligned on Khris staying in Milwaukee. Clearly, they, neither or both weren't excited enough to get that done before the season, which they could have via extension. I think it makes a lot of sense for certainly the Bucks more to wait on that and see how this season played out. It does make you wonder, assuming they get it done, how does that look? And it feels like the two options are shorter and for more money. I mean, obviously the nuclear option, not nuclear, but the one firm option right now is the player option, which is 1 year, $40 million. That seems like maybe the shortest term thing. I don't think Khris would sign a 1 year deal for less. I don't think the Bucks would give him a 1 year deal for more. But they could get creative here. I mean, where Chris Paul's contract is in headlines right now for all the options Phoenix has, given the way it ends. That's an option for the Bucks too. I mean, they can start year one up to basically the maximum salary. I don't think they would. They could. They can go down. They can go up year over year. Some can be guaranteed. Some cannot. they have the ability, if they want to give him a set number over 5 years, to do that. So it's going to be interesting to see how it goes. I mean, clearly none of this is what they can do, you can source me on. What will actually happen, please don't. I have no idea. I don't think anyone has any idea what the Bucks will do ever, really. But I don't know. It's just going to be interesting to see. I mean, Khris obviously deserves a lot of money. He's still an elite player when he plays, and he still plays most of the games, even if he didn't this past season. I think overall he's been healthy enough. Clearly he was in 21. But I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see, and I do think we may see something different than just it's not going to be like, here's your max again, Khris. It's not going to be that, I don't think. It'll be fascinating to see how they solve it. Same with Brook Lopez, who we'll talk about in a second. But, they could give him $100 million without it being an unseemly cap hit in any given year, which I think is going to be interesting for both sides as something to talk about in negotiations.
I think the obvious thing, both with his age and with the Bucks situation, no real read into if this would be of interest or beneficial to Khris. I think Khris should probably try to lock in as many years as he can, as much money as he can at this point. I think a 2+1 and maybe at a pretty hefty price is maybe the way to go. That would also align with Giannis's timeline then as well for when he could next be a free agent. And as much as I almost like to go that way and think too much about that, the Bucks have to one, give themselves options with that, because if that goes down to the wire and Giannis ends up staying, you may need to freshen up and you might need the money to come off in a younger player to somehow, a lot of things would have to happen, but potentially to come into the mix at that point. But even beyond that, if the worst case was to happen, you would want the clean break. And just being able to start from scratch at that point would be what you'd really need to do. And the Bucks would have a tough road back, but having Khris Middleton, say, for 5 years, if they went with a 5-year contract of some sort and maybe at a lower price, I don't know if 5 years from now, possibly 3 years beyond Giannis, if things were to go poorly, would be all that beneficial to the Bucks to have him locked in. It was certainly for Khris, so that's kind of part of what I'm interested in too, and I wonder what way all of the injuries factor into that as well, as in what exactly Khris is willing to compromise on, where I'm going to assume that very high priority for him is just wanting to stay in Milwaukee, where he's been most of his career and where his family are settled and things like that too. But like, where does all of that kind of pan out in his decisions or in the shape of his career? And then the other part of this too, like we've heard Drew Holiday talk about when he wants to retire, another factor to consider in that, but also that's a little bit earlier than you might associate with some players. Khris could be a guy where we learn he has his own view of, I think at 34 I'll be done. I think at 35 I'll be done. I'm not someone who wants to still be playing at 38 years old. We don't really have any sense of that, but this is the kind of point in guys' careers where we might start to learn that. So they can get creative and they can get creative with the money, but it's really, I think the years are the most crucial thing. If they want to spend an incredible amount of money and it's front loaded over a pretty short deal, go for it. I mean, that's what you're left to play with really anyway. It's kind of, you are going to be riding this out to some extent. I have no issue with that. It'll just be interesting to see if the Bucks can get something that, from our vantage point, we could say immediately, okay, well, it makes sense. And the outs are there, whether it's that they're going to have to upgrade or rework things out, or if it ends up being a situation where everything is being torn down and they're starting from scratch. Because we're getting to the point where it will always be those two options. It's actually, the middle ground is going to be increasingly difficult for the Bucks. It's like, if this works out and even you go through a next cycle, next deals for guys, it's going to be at a place where the Bucks are like, do we just keep all in, or is it time to pull the plug completely? And obviously we know what will determine that decision, but I think that's the interesting part of where they go with years.
And to be clear, at year 4 or 5 on that isn't for the Bucks. I mean, the benefit of that structure for the Bucks is 18-20 million less cap hit. Like, if Khris says, listen, you want to give me $100 million over 3 years or over 5 years, I'll take either. That second apron is looming, and if Khris is on a much lower annual figure for the next 2-3 years, that does a lot in terms of keeping you under that. There's very restrictive, punitive things about going there, which even include draft picks for later. And I think if you can stay under that second apron more, it might net out as better, even in the worst case scenario where, things are blown up in 3 years. If you're paying Khris $40 million over 2 and, Khris is in his mid-late 30s at that point, he's not that good. But you dodge the second apron and you keep some draft picks that would be, by default, the worst pick in the draft because of that second apron rule. It's still probably worth it. And, of course, can you keep an MLE in some of these years and have that $5 million contract to spend versus if you go over the certain apron, you don't get that anymore. I think those are all factors. So I'm not saying, like, in 2026 we'd be like, wow, really glad Khris Middleton is making $25 million or $20 million or whatever. It's more about these next few years still. And I think the other sell of that to Khris would be, hey, you realize we need to pivot younger. If you're on a reasonable amount for this many years, though, I think it's cleaner to somehow be able to keep Khris in that pivot and have him be on the team. But I don't know if he wants to take an annual salary that is half of what his player option is, which is what that basically is. We'll see. I thought the Al Horford deal was surprising. It looks pretty good for him right now. But, guys have their priorities, and it's hard to figure out what they're going to be before we actually see the contract inked.
Opt-out date is June 30th, correct?
Might even be earlier. June 21st.
June 21st.
So we'll know in 9 days.
Yeah, not earlier.
Yeah.
Because we're already seeing option dates come in, or option decisions come in with Fred VanVleet making a decision on his option. So, this we'll know very soon what direction this all could lead towards and whether, I would be very shocked if Khris leaves.
Yeah, the opt won't tell us either way.
No. Yeah, exactly.
He could opt into the 1 year deal and they could extend and it could be longer, which is exactly what Pat Connaughton did last offseason. So, we won't have that. That won't be the whole thing. It'll just give us some info on what they may be planning to do.
I think if he ends up leaving, something has gone catastrophically wrong in negotiations, like at the last stage.
Oh, clearly, yeah.
I can't see any other route to that. I don't think he's probably even in a place now where he's thinking, I'll see what else is out there too. Or it doesn't seem logically like that's the path. So I think if it goes wrong, it's gone really wrong if he ends up elsewhere.
Yeah.
So another free agent, and let me just pull this up now. The projected practical cap space for every team. Not many teams will have it. And this, of course, is a big deal for all of these conversations because unless the Bucks are helping another team over the cap with a sign and trade, is Khris or the player we're going to talk about now, Brook Lopez, going to go to Houston, Utah, San Antonio, Oklahoma City, Detroit, Indiana? Maybe. I don't know. I mean, if they're going to give Brook Lopez $200 million or something, maybe. I don't know if we'll see that happening. But the reporting, and the one I've seen is from Kelly Iko of The Athletic. I was looking in Jake Fisher's stuff because I thought there was one there too, but I haven't seen it recent. Couldn't find it when I was looking for this pod. But very plainly, Kelly states, quote, Brook Lopez is a free agent Houston likes. And the difficult thing here is Houston is the cap space boogeyman this offseason. I mean, their cap space isn't even practical. Like, they have $47 million right now before they even do anything. And, like, that's before renouncing players or, sometimes you can cut people. They're going to have, like, $60 million. So they are the team that is like the boogeyman of, every free agent gets rumored there to make sure they get their money. It makes sense. Sounds like they really do like Brook Lopez, though. All the reporting around Houston is that, they're not trying to do this rebuild thing, right? Like they're not happy with the kids. They want James Harden. And apparently they're going to get him. They want more vets. They might trade Jalen Green for a more established player. So it adds up that they would want him. And I think what makes this more interesting is Adrian Griffin in his presser, which you guys talked about last week, talked about defensively. They want to be more aggressive on the ball. They want to adapt more. And he also shouted out Brook Lopez as a great core player. It wasn't like something that was specifically anti-Brook Lopez, that sentiment. It's also not pro-Brook Lopez to suggest they're going to be more aggressive going after the ball and adjust more because there's only so many coverages that you can have a 7-foot behemoth playing on the floor, especially in the modern NBA when adjust more often means switch more. So I think it's interesting. I think it's worth talking about. I still think Brook will end up a Buck, but I'm worried. Where are you guys at?
I mean, from a Bucks perspective, regardless, it's feeding into the same way we were speaking about Khris and just the way that contracts are and the way that the Bucks cap situation restricts them and limits their ability to strengthen through various other tools that will be other teams around the league's disposal. So if the Bucks lose Brook Lopez, they're in big trouble. Even if Brook Lopez is going to be somewhat de-emphasized. And I know how weird that sounds. I know how counterproductive that sounds because you're going to have to pay him and pay him pretty well, I'm sure, if he's going to stay. But Adrian Griffin can have his preferences. If the Bucks still want to build the best roster possible, they're going to have to pay Brook Lopez to have him as an option, even if his role ends up reduced, even if we see less of him in clutch situations, even if we see a lot of smaller sets. I think the one thing that will be obvious with the way Griffin is talking is if we just see Giannis really implemented as a center and in much more aggressive defensive configurations than we've ever seen before. I think part of the problem here for the Bucks too, they really could and should be like I've been complaining about this for years of what's the Brook succession plan. And I mean, we ended up in the best possible place because Brook has been so good last season that we're not reaching the place where it's actually, oh, well, he's washed. They need someone else. We're back in a place where it's like, oh, he's still really good. Someone else might manage to take him from the Bucks. Bobby Portis is not the answer at all. He's not the answer for what they were doing defensively. He's not going to be the answer for what they are doing defensively. And I think that puts the Bucks in a really, really tough spot as well, because it's not like they could completely change Giannis's role and rework things and be like, look, we feel good on that because Bobby is there as kind of an alternating piece depending what lineups we go through, and we feel just as confident in that. I think at this point, what we've seen over the years, that's just not the case. And we know what Bobby can bring at his best, but Bobby at his best is not going to solve the problems that would be created by one, losing Brook Lopez, or by switching to a scheme in the mold of what Adrian Griffin seems like he might want to do. So I don't know if I'm worried. I mean, the Houston thing has been significant and rumbled on for a couple of months now, where I'm not going to just say, oh, it's not real at all. I don't know if I'm worried about the buzz as much as I am just the general prospect of, yeah, if the Bucks are to lose Brook Lopez, it's catastrophic. But if it, like the Rockets too, and as you said, you talked about Harden, if you're going all out and you're getting Harden, you don't want to rebuild. What does a James Harden, Brook Lopez splashy free agency do for you? You missed the playoffs in the West. I mean, unless you've got a whole lot more going on or you've got bigger plans that you're going to cook up somewhere else, it doesn't really do a whole lot with that. And even when you run through the wider list of teams with cap space too, it's like, well, some of those jump out as pretty obvious places where Brook Lopez probably isn't going to go. San Antonio, for example, I think they're going to have different plans for what their front court is going to look like over the course of the next season, and many more to come after that. So I'm concerned just in a general sense, because I think it's a really tough one for the Bucks to work out a center rotation if Brook walks, regardless of what kind of plan might be in place for whether they're continuing with drop, whether they're going to switch more, whether they're going to be much more aggressive, whether they're going to play smaller. If you want to have options there that are going to win you a lot of basketball games, make you the best team possible, your best path to doing that is with Brook remaining on the Bucks, regardless of what else you might pull off. Maybe there's a creative solution where Brook moves on and you find other ways to do things. It's kind of tough to envision it, though. You'd have to be in the reads making it, and maybe John Horst will find that and that works out. But right now, that's kind of difficult to imagine.
2 words. Leverage ploy. I wasn't confident on the second one. That's what I think of any Houston Rock. There's been, just to go through a list of names that have been associated with the Houston
They're very
Rockets.
ambitious, Jordan.
Very ambitious. Have the most cap space, as you mentioned. Brook Lopez, James Harden, Kyrie Irving's name is he's associated with them as much as there's been a lot of whispers about him being content in Dallas and even wanting LeBron James to get traded there.
Yeah, LeBron, just get bought out, LeBron. Just go do that. That's totally normal for a player of your stature.
Who else? I saw Austin Reeves. Reeves, the boy wonder. Just on and on and on.
Fred VanVleet, I think.
Fred VanVleet, I believe, was another name.
He's been an Orlando guy too. Orlando is the team I didn't mention. They could get $20 million. That's terrifying because if there's one team Brook would want to play
like
for,
that.
Yeah. But they have Wendell Carter Jr., so we're gonna hope that they don't dump Wendell to sign Brook Lopez.
All I would say is, if you have the most cap space, you're going to be automatically associated with any free agent that wants a top dollar contract. It's just that simple. That said, I do think the coaching change, and given how much of a priority Rick's role was within the foundation of the Bucks under Bud, was so essential to operating defensively, specifically. But obviously, he had more use than just being a 7-foot paint protector that was easily the best in the league for the last 5 years. It is interesting to see how Adrian Griffin and his staff will, I guess, has their input been on how they can do some different things without reinventing the wheel? Does that include Brook Lopez coming back, and therefore how does that change contract discussions and all that stuff? So it's like these little ripple effects of, because they have made the decision to move on from Bud and hire Adrian Griffin and just new coach, and obviously his expertise is on that side of the ball. So there's even more of a magnifying glass and just what he values, because again, Brook Lopez is the core of what the Bucks have done defensively for the last 5 years. It is very interesting to just see how that will affect everything, on top of all the other questions of he's age 35, coming off arguably the best season of his career as a role player, not just the Brook Lopez low post scoring machine back to the Brooklyn Nets days. I don't know. I still feel confident. I don't feel as confident as the Khris decision, just because I think clearly Brook has more agency in what he can do, because he is a free agent flat out at the moment.
I think he's more desirable too, honestly. I mean, I think it's somewhat less complicated. I could be proven wrong on that, depending on what his ask is contract-wise. But I think coming off the season he's just had, and it's kind of, look, the league has pivoted back to legitimate size and centers being important, because you've got so many stars who are centers. And that maybe even if you're, I don't know, if your team, say, that has to play the Denver Nuggets quite a lot, you might be like, yeah, it'd be great to have a really accomplished defensive big body, or whatever that might be. Like, I think that makes him slightly more appealing too, which is kind of a key difference there, because he'll be expensive, I think, in a relative sense, but he's not going to be top line expensive. It's not like you're going to have to be betting everything on Brook Lopez necessarily in a way you would be with Khris.
Yeah. I mean, does he ultimately make, what was Al Horford's extension? It was like maybe $11 million?
It was it was very low.
Or something like that, which is not that dissimilar to what Brook is already making. It's a step down, but it could easily fall in that range. I do think that is your point of the team. I mean, I think I even saw something the other day of teams are kind of coming back around, and we're seeing why size matters in the playoffs. So, and even Adrian Griffin, his team, they didn't have a center for a good chunk of last year. They make the trade for Jakob Poeltl, and it didn't really amount to anything meaningful.
That's kind of something I've been thinking about with that too. It's like, if the Bucks were to lose Brook or actively decide to move on, they would start to look very Raptors-y, but in the configuration of the Raptors, which has never quite worked because they've been missing a piece. Like
Yeah.
it's for everything else that we might even try to project from the system that Adrian Griffin has most recently been a part of and the ultimate success. Yeah, when they won the championship, they had Marc Gasol and Serge Ibaka.
2 centers. Yeah.
And
They were really
Kawhi Leonard's
big.
your 3, and he's has the longest arms on the face of the earth.
It's a great
Can I ask you
point.
about a question too? Because this is tough to really kind of nail down or parse without knowing. Okay, if Brook was gone, what would be the solution to replace it? Well, where's your confidence at in the Bucks, like collectively as a defensive team? If Brook was somewhat out of the equation,
They need to find. They'd have to go get someone else who can play a defense as a big.
I
think
kind of
they'd be
feel like
I don't
they-
know. I don't know if it's a big. I think it's more.
they'd need more from. I feel multiple spots because
Yeah.
it's like Brook is part along with Giannis. I mean, obviously in terms of size, they can cover off multiple positions and they can cover up mistakes made elsewhere. And I guess you could put Drew's defensive ability into that too. He just feels like such an essential cog of the defense and like separate from scheme that I worry that all of our collective idea of the Bucks as a defensive team, we could find to be very overrated, honestly, if they didn't manage to find a couple of really strong defensive pieces, really solid players that would slot in and then further kind of consolidate what you expect to get from Giannis and Drew.
Yeah, I think you'd need another center. It just wouldn't be someone as important as Brook was. But I think you still want that configuration. You don't want to not be able to drop against big teams and have a big body for big guys, as you mentioned, Jordan. I mean, Nikola Jokic, Joel Embiid in the conference. Like you don't just want to put Giannis on them to start. I don't think that's a good idea, especially in the regular season. So, you need to find just like a center who's probably, there's a lot of solid defensive centers, probably someone like that who's like your game starter. I think Kevon Looney's quite good, but like kind of similar to how do the Warriors do it, where he's probably not closing games, but he's going to start and do a bunch of dirty work for you. And then you'd need a wing, and that would be the more. I think that was what you'd put more resources in. You'd need another defensive wing, and do you try Jay Crowder out again? I don't know. Didn't go well. They have his bird rights, so it's much more attainable. But
I know I was laughing at Adams. Oh God!
But is it?
I mean, the thing.
He had a very good season until the playoffs. He looked very good.
And what happened the second the season finished? I mean, I know it's not what he's doing on the court. I don't really have much interest in that guy.
Listen, I'm not. If it wasn't for the bird rights, I would have less. But it's kind of like a free thing. It's not free because it costs money. But I don't know. You don't have to trade for him. You don't have to hope he takes Vetman.
Like he sucked. He was terrible.
Yeah.
He was really bad. If he was better, he would have found his purpose pretty quickly.
I agree.
And he came out and played the blame game the second the season finished. And at that point, I'm just like, yeah, go play elsewhere. Like I don't care for it. I don't see that as the pad. It's not like he's a nothing player. That he's not capable of being good, but the Bucks gave him a chance to be good. He would have had a much, much more significant chance if he showed anything at all. He was so bad. So the fact that, particularly given how his situation has evolved in Phoenix, and you could go to previous stops too, that the season had just finished. It's just over, and he's out playing the blame game.
Well,
I didn't know my purpose.
He said he wants to come back too. It's not like he totally torched the org.
That's great.
I think he felt very comfortable to say all of the things that he did.
Yeah.
Knowing what the outcome was likely going to be.
I think that's probably true.
Yeah.
I just still think it's on him. We could pick a lot of holes in the coaching that went wrong. I don't see where the Jay Crowder issues were, other than he missed all of the shots when he was out there. And his defense didn't look very good at all.
Defense is terrible.
And you're not playable. So great, you didn't know your purpose. None of us did either. We were like, what the hell was his purpose? Why did they trade for him? So just miss me with him coming back. I get again. I'm always the first person to be like, this is so tough for the Bucks to build a winning roster, the best possible roster, because of where they are in a salary sense. That I'm always really reluctant to see them part with players that they've already spent the capital on, that they're there, and you have the option to re-sign them. If they ultimately do it, I'm sure I'll just say fine, and we'll see. But it will purely be because of the salary elements. I mean, I don't think there's a good basketball reason based on what he gave you to be like, yeah, let's bring you back and let's pay you. Which there's also the part of it, yeah, it gets easier. You can keep him and you can pay him his next deal. But as you alluded to earlier, the Bucks have greater incentives than ever before to really manage their spending, which is going to be very high, but they've got to rein it in to some extent. If you're going to say goodbye to someone that you could be keeping, I think he's made himself the prime candidate to go, and I'm perfectly fine with that. If he showed anything, if he was remotely good, we'd all been like, why isn't Jay Crowder playing? Let's bring Jay Crowder back. He didn't do any of that, so that's why he should be on the chopping block.
He did before the playoffs. It's like 40 total minutes. It's an extremely small sample. I thought Grayson looked a lot better after looking, I think, equally as unplayable at times the previous postseason. Thrown in midseason, rotation probably too big.
This is not Grayson though. This is a guy who's super experienced, who's been to the finals, he's been around the block. This isn't Grayson was the not by super low, but you were betting on a young guy with a lot of room to develop. You're going to put him in a bigger situation than he's been in before. And so that's a move you make with long-term planning in place. I think that's probably the opposite of the Crowder deal, because every time the Bucks have made a move like that for one of those players with all those second-round picks, they have never kept them for a second season. And I think if you're doing it now, I'm really going to be... I don't know if the right lessons are being learned from what's happened from, for example, PJ Tucker not sticking around or whatever that might be. I don't even think the value is there that would have been there when it was Nikola Mirotic. You know how I feel about Nikola Mirotic, but it just in terms of age profile and where he was at in his career, if the Bucks had been like, and there were some reports which I don't know if I believe because I found them puzzling at the time, but that the Bucks were interested in retaining him when he went back to Europe. In this case, though, I just think we're talking about an older player, a player who his exit from Phoenix on a good team was very, very weird. And then you come and you get your fresh start, and this is what comes from it. And then the season ends and you're talking like that. And then all of a sudden, what? Let's give him more money and let's give him multiple years and have him back. Not for me, but we'll see. It's an option that's on the table because there's so few options on the table. Like, I get it.
Yeah, that's where I'm at. I mean, the ultimate thing for me is that I do think the Bucks just need another 3-4 kind of guy like that. That you want Jay Crowder, but what Jay Crowder could give you in a good year. That's why.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, that's basically where, if they make any defensive changes in terms of just their operating structure and system and everything like that, like it's getting younger, it's getting more athletic.
Yeah.
Really, like that is the thing. Is like Jay Crowder. He's getting up there in age too, and has played a lot of minutes, has bounced around, and this is probably going to be mean of me to say, but there's a reason why he's always been kind of a placeholder for teams where they have gotten better options after he left or traded them or whatever. So he's a good player. Robert Covington is the same kind of guy where he's always been good contract. We're going to move you 4 times over the course of it, kind of thing. But yeah, I just think that overall positional profile that the Bucks just really haven't locked down is just that kind of 3-4 kind of guy that's super athletic. We're seeing what like Aaron Gordon's doing this year in the finals and just how he's thrived. Aaron Gordon type player is not out there for the Bucks at all. But it's because you have to draft them or they're really expensive, which is why Robert Covington and Jay Crowder, there's always a market for them. Yeah.
Bucks drafted an athletic wing. Not that big, but we'll see.
No, not that big, but Somehow, Jordan, I don't think that we're going to be getting followed and unfollowed on Twitter in the aftermath of this
I
conversation.
don't think so either.
He might be listening though. But my thing, and using the Nuggets as the reasoning, I'm not saying you keep Jay Crowder and then you're good on the wing. I'm saying you keep Jay Crowder and then add another wing, because that's what Denver did. Denver just kept adding wing players until they had a bunch. And I mean, you can say they added younger wing players, but Bruce Brown might as well be 37. They're not going to be able to keep him. They can't pay him. So he's going to go get paid somewhere after this year. I mean, I think, they have Jeff Green over there, who, again, is an older player and is not one of their main players, but they just have so many wings. That's every time I watch Denver, I go, oh, my God, they have so many wings. The Bucks kind of got there. They're not, clearly didn't have enough really good ones, right, and we saw in the playoffs. But I think you keep Crowder and then you try and add the younger, more athletic player too and just have the options. I'm not going to cry if he just walks. If they can sign and trade him, that totally works. You can do that and get a second-round pick or something. Sure, why not? Then you're only -4 on the whole thing. But I just see it as being a logical idea, because we all agree they need wings. They need to find more playable wing players however they can. It'll be fascinating to see. On this whole conversation, we're wholly off the rails now. I've seen they should consider trading Pat and or Grayson to get younger, get more flexible, get more athletic. I think there's a player on a mid-tier salary the Bucks could trade to do those things that it's not either of those players, considering those are two players who played well at the wing in the playoffs. I don't really want to dump either of them. I mean, Pat's not a spring chicken, but played his best ball in the playoffs. I thought Grayson played pretty well in the playoffs. He's younger. I think you look at Bobby Portis and putting together everything we've talked about in this entire podcast so far, it's not really a wing player. Is younger, not the most athletic, cannot be the center. We saw this. We know this, right? When Brook was out. You just can't do it. Cannot really be the 4 next to Giannis at the 5 either. And I think the difficult thing for Bobby is I think he's a hell of a player. I think he is a good basketball player. What the Bucks need is not something he provides. And I just think the fit is so clunky. And even someone like Brook, where the fit is not perfect. Like if Brook was, the same age, the same skill level, but like he was PJ Tucker instead, but like shot better, like a little younger, that works better. Because I do think Apex Bucks is probably still, like in an ideal world, at the end of the game, Giannis is at the 5, and you have a guard and 3 wings, and you switch everything, and they shoot and they pass. Like that's probably it. And
has that ever existed though? Because
no.
I agree, but also we could get there and really find out that that's not Apex.
It kind of did when they had PJ.
Yeah, I guess
having both modes really is. But I think more often than not, at the end of those series, it was PJ and Giannis 4-5, and they were just, there was nothing you could do defensively. Like they rebounded well enough because of PJ. They defended all positions. Like there was really no holes. Even with Khris at that time, even not being a great defender anymore. But Brook is still good enough of a fit, and it still fits cleanly enough in the big configurations, and is still good enough to where we're all like, yeah, they should bring him back. He's that good. Bobby is less good and worse of a fit. And I just think, as much as it pains me, as much as he's embraced Milwaukee, I think it just makes more sense for him to be the guy that gets traded. If whether, we need to replenish the draft capital, make our next move, we need to not go into the second apron, whatever it is, I wouldn't dump him for nothing, to be clear. I don't think that's a good idea ever. But if there's someone who has to go or get younger or get cheaper, I just think that's the guy that makes the most sense, even including the free agents right now. Would I say I'd rather have Jay Crowder on the team than Bobby Portis next year? No. But I do look at Bobby as closer to making sense as a guy who's not on the team than Pat or Grayson, who I think when push came to shove were good wing players, and you just don't want less of those.
I'm with you. I mean, I've been there from when it was very, very unpopular. I think the issues that were always there with Bobby remain, and we're coming off a season where offensively things were tougher for him. And the absolute peak of what he gave the Bucks is, in a lot of ways, tying into things that... There was a 2-season spell where I think even just zooming out and looking at his career, there were some things that were definitely just possibly a little unsustainable. And that's fine. I mean, this happens to players in their career, and I'm very glad the Bucks got to be the team to really get that out of Bobby, and Bobby is forever a legend and a hero in Milwaukee as a result. But the things that were a concern before only become a greater concern when everyone else is getting older around them and when you may be trying to get more flexible. Um, Funnily enough, even though he was never the perfect player system-wise, I feel like for Bud's Bucks, I think the loss of Bud potentially opening up greater defensive changes hurts him even more, because if Brook gets de-emphasized, or if they were to lose Brook, it kind of counterintuitively, I think, leaves Bobby in even more of a no man's land. So I am inclined to agree with you on that. I also I think they may have to do more than just, it mightn't just be like, okay, well, is it time to trade someone like Bobby, for example? But it could be, I like what you're saying with Jay Crowder, because someone probably likes him. I wonder, can you get a sign and trade out of Jay Crowder? And are they the kind of the couple moves you pull that you get some picks back, or you get a young player who is maybe a better fit, whether that's a younger, more athletic 3-4, or a younger, more athletic switchable big, like between a couple of things like that. If you can do that, you can kind of reshape some of the ideas that are at the core of, well, who are the Milwaukee Bucks, and give Adrian Griffin the flexibility to possibly do what he wants to do. Because otherwise that's going to be really tough. Because I think that's the other thing we've got to factor in here. We're talking about what makes sense and what the Bucks' options are from roster construction, but we don't actually really have any understanding of what that constructed roster is going to look like on the floor anymore. And I think even we can talk about, the comments about aggressive defense, and I don't know, I'd take them with a pretty significant pinch of salt too, because it was all very surface level, as you'd expect from an introductory press conference. We're not getting the real kind of details, the kind of details that I'm sure Adrian Griffin laid out for the Bucks front office and ownership in his interviews
on a video
but
board.
Yeah, that's key to him getting the job, was he just wanted to work the board. I think that's something where it's difficult for us to project, and we can easily say what makes sense. But they've hired Adrian Griffin. At some point, they've got to find a way to do something to give him the tools that are best suited to what he wants to do. So that is the thing that I think could open up all sorts of possibilities and could leave us honestly really surprised in some way as this goes on, because this is their guy. So his vision is something they've been sold on. I know he's talked about how good the team was and you want to build on that. But if there's anything even kind of like moderately different that he wants to do, Bucks don't have the personnel for it. Well, John Horst, you got to go support your guy. So they're going to have to find a way to go and do that and help him out. So that's kind of a wild card here, where I think we can talk about what's logic from roster building and what we would have applied to these conversations over the last 4 to 5 years, where we knew how the Bucks were going to play. That's kind of all out the window. It's the biggest variable in all of this. And it's the thing where maybe we're just left stunned by one or two things that we're like, well, how can they do that? Or why would they do that? And it might be something that, whether it works or not, we'll only actually learn when we get to see an Adrian Griffin Bucks team in reality and playing over the course of a season.
Yeah, I mean, that's the kind of tier of players that we're talking about now. Is that, what is a new coach? How does Adrian Griffin value them, or see their path on this team and everything like that? Like that, it's not the paradigm has shifted from how it would be under Bud and everything like that. And it very well could be like, okay, we're going to go with the same roster that we have largely from last year, and we are going to just have a new coach, and then we'll figure out from there, just to see how he can shape things differently. I don't think that would be an inspiring route. I don't think any real, like, outside of getting like a for sure like fire starter top whatever number player on the Bucks, a couple months down the line or whatever it is at the start of the free agency or whatever. I don't think any part of the personnel decisions or anything like that would really leave us like, that is the ultimate way to go. That is where that beats them up even more or anything like that. Because frankly, like, once we get past Giannis, Chris, and Drew, Brook is kind of in his own class because he is a free agent, so it's a little bit different. But like, I don't know. I don't know how you reckon with like you have good young or not young, but you have good wing players. You have good players that have learned how to play off of Giannis, have learned how to play with Chris and Drew for many years now. Have wanted to stay around. I mean, even wasn't Joe Ingles at Adrian Griffin's?
He was.
Press. That's not nothing for the time being. I don't know what they do with that of like, okay, we feel like we have the tools to make a deep run. It's just a matter of how can they fit a new guy's vision that clearly doesn't just want to play the same way that the Bucks have wanted to play. And I do believe a lot of it was, it's reassuring to hear that things are going to be different, but it also was very just, how it is every introductory press conference for a new head coach. It's like, we're going to play this way. We're going to play this the right way, blah, 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 blah. We kind of get used to it the more we kind of see these things, but it won't be felt until honestly July 1st or any surprise movements that might happen over the next coming weeks and months that really influence just like how much of a team or how much this team will change, whether, it's people moving or just how people are being used and how much that affects, overall morale and everything like that.
I'd rework your tier slightly. I think there's one tier and it has Giannis in it. I think that's the point we're at with the Bucks, where like obviously there's always been a tier where Giannis is in on his own, but I do think now, like I wouldn't leave Drew Holiday just because he's not a free agent out of any particular tier. Like if the Bucks can make a deal that's going to solve a lot of problems for them or make them younger or extend their window and involves moving Drew Holiday, they're going to move Drew Holiday. So I think anyone not named Giannis, it's all up in the air. Like anything could happen at this point. And maybe more so than we've ever experienced when the team were relevant and good. I think it's very tough for us to get a read on that, tough for anyone to get a read on that outside of the four walls that is the Bucks organization.
Well, I think the interesting thing is, and we won't probably go too much deeper right now because we still have coaching stuff to talk about. We're at an hour of podcast. But, I think if Drew or Brook is to move, I think it kind of necessitates shaking up basically the whole roster because as we discussed with Brook, there's a defensive equilibrium there. And I don't think, let's say even if they bring back Brook, I don't think you can trade Drew and just slot in, let's just say Brad Beal. Let's not even whatever. Just assume 1-for-1. Wizards have no reason to do that. Who cares? Then it's like, okay, your defense is Brad Beal. Let's just Grayson Allen. He always starts. Grayson Allen, Khris Middleton, Giannis, Brook. It's not a good 1-3 defensively. Like that's not. I don't think that's probably tenable for you. And Brad Beal is not really a point guard. Whatever. Put it aside, right? Like, your personnel just becomes probably not defensive focused enough. So I kind of do think it's like make a lot of changes or make a little bit and then wait. I mean, I've outlined this before, but next draft, 2024, you could trade that pick, 2 future firsts and Marjon. That just seems like such a logical time for the Bucks to be like, this is our big swing to redo the supporting cast. Like to put a player, 2 players next to Giannis who are similar in age, and then we can keep contending if we're still at a place where Giannis is bought in to do so. That is still a point that makes more sense than this summer where you have 1 draft pick, you don't have one you can trade on draft day, and you have Marjon, who's, worth something, probably less than a theoretical first because teams like it's the mystery box fallacy. So we'll see. The second apron stuff impacts that 24 plan too, which is super annoying. Way to go, CJ McCollum. This is why Rohan hates you. But yeah, it's. I do think that that's actually not. Rohan hates you for other reasons, but this is another one. I think it is possible there could be huge changes this summer too. I just still think it's probably more likely they wait a year, but who knows? I mean, it is a new coach. We don't know what his vision is. He said what he's going to say. On the other hand, I don't think there's any universe where the Bucks hire someone who would say, yeah, Chris and Drew aren't getting the job done, so we're gonna flip them. We're gonna find new guys. Good luck, John. Figure it out.
Well, what you're saying is completely logical. I guess my only counter would be, I don't know if the Bucks can just be like, oh, we'll wait a year, and that's the time when we play the next big chip. I don't know if they have the kind of the extra year
Yeah.
at this point where
Well, yeah, it's
there's the urgency depending what they feel, and like the thing is, obviously, if you're doing that next year, it would be the last big move to be like, okay, well, here's Star X that we could potentially bring in and partner with Giannis. This is the new look Bucks, and Giannis might already be like, maybe it's time. Or if he's not, maybe you could push him over that line if you get that move wrong. So it's one where they don't have the luxury of it, but if you were to do something that you want to do it, I think having the bit of cushion, like having the 2 years, actually is very much desirable. But there's an element of that which, again, they're in a tough spot. This is how you build a winner, and they haven't had draft picks hit in the kind of massive way that's going to save you from this. So in some areas, you're going to end up between a rock and a hard place. We'll see what they do to get out of it.
I think Indiana's got a couple late firsts. They really want to power forward. One last thing on trade talk. Just think that's interesting. I just think that's...
For the record, I don't want this pinned as some sort of, Ty does a podcast with the Winning Six guys and look how long it is. Someone else brought Jay Crowder and all of that into this and spun this part of the conversation up. So I just want it out there on the record. We're not who we used to be, right, Jordan?
That is true. We have people are getting leg lengthened surgeries. We're cutting our own legs.
Well, I'm re-lengthening them. I'm Isaiah Thomasing you.
We're just naturally aging. I think that's what it is. We're just getting shorter. Shrinking our corncob bodies.
Seb Newmark, he's got a Gumby body. Eric Nehm of The Athletic reported Nate Mitchell and DJ Backer will be joining the Griffin-led coaching staff. He also reported Josh Oppenheimer, a Giannis guy, shouldn't really be surprising, and Vin Baker, which is fun, will be retained from Bud's staff as well. So the new coaching staff that we know of is Adrian Griffin at the top, Terry Stotts, the offense guy, Joe Prunty, former Bucks assistant and stand-in head coach.
Since we hadn't recorded, right?
I think so. I think you guys, you'd remember talking about Prunty if you had.
We didn't talk about Prunty or Patrick Mutombo.
Patrick Mutombo. No relation, I believe, by the way, to Dikembe.
Nope.
No relation. From the same tribe, from the same part of Congo.
So some relation, but no direct relation.
No relation. And he's very clear and very adamant on that. So.
And then now all the four guys I just said. So a pretty deep bench already at this point. I mean, we've gotten a lot of coaches. I'm not going to try and do math live, but so if you're not familiar, real quick, Prunty, former Bucks, been an assistant all over the place. Former Bucks assistant, was with Atlanta. I don't know if you guys saw that. I posted this somewhere. He brought the Jared Bayless game winner play to Atlanta, and Adrian Griffin's son, AJ Griffin, hit the layup, which I thought was a fun. Maybe AJ Griffin should get like a finder's fee for that one. And hey, Dad, this guy knows how to draw up this one play. He's worth having. Patrick Mutombo was a Raptors assistant and was a promising coach for the Raptors 905. Has kind of been viewed as like one of those, he'll have an NBA head coaching job someday, but not now guy for the last couple cycles, I think.
Coached Alex Antetokounmpo.
Yes, that's a good flag as well. Nate Mitchell, and I'm getting some of this from Bucks Zone, SI Bucks site. Matthew Duganzik probably, wrote a good article summing up some of this. So let me scroll. Mitchell, who is expected to focus on player development in Milwaukee, started his coaching career with James Borrego's Hornets. Of course, the Bucks cannot quit James Borrego. They had to have some tie there as well.
I don't know how to quit you.
They can't. They love that guy. Baker, it's Bakker, was an assistant coach of Dwayne Casey's on the Pistons. He also was the head coach of the Motor City Cruise, the G League affiliate for the Pistons, in 2021. So he has some experience there as well. A couple of younger coaches, I would say. So it's kind of, I think, a pretty good mix so far of the young up-and-comers. Griffin talked a lot about creativity when he was for his staff. I think that probably comprises some of that. And, of course, Prunty and certainly Stotts, who have been around for a long time and have more experience. Vin Baker obviously brings a ton of player experience and knows how to be a big guy, even though he hasn't been a coach for as long. And then Oppenheimer, kind of another coach who's been around for a while and clearly has the connection with Giannis. So a pretty diverse staff in terms of experience level, what they've done, which seems promising. I mean, we always said if it's going to be a rookie head coach, they need to have a strong staff. I think this is a pretty good staff to have around Adrian Griffin, to be honest. I've been pretty impressed with the amount of names and the quality of names that they've brought in here.
Joe Prunty as maybe in this case the fourth seat on the bench. Like that's pretty stacked. I think you'd have to feel pretty good about that. I think Prunty, obviously he's had such a long career and I'm sure there's no shortage of connections and just general awareness of him. I feel like Prunty though has PJ Carlissimo connections, who was Adrian Griffin's coach at Seton Hall, and he seems to have a kind of a close mentorship relationship in that regard. So I wouldn't be surprised if maybe some conversation happened there. Who should I look to? And Prunty was the name put forward. And obviously, Prunty may have been a recommendation internally from the Bucks front office too. And I think, like, I don't know, I saw some of the reaction, I guess, from Bucks fans online. And we're far enough removed now that I think there's probably even fewer people who really remember or care to remember, at least not in the way that the three of us do, the Joe Prunty era in Milwaukee. And they just kind of say, oh, a coach with kid connections, and kind of recoil against that. Prunty was very different to Jason Kidd. And if anything, I would hate to even imagine what could have happened to the Bucks if the counterbalance of Joe Prunty was not on that staff at that time. Obviously, he stepped up as interim head coach when Kidd was fired, but also had a notable spell when Kidd got mid-season back surgery in his second season as head coach.
Yes, it was. That was like the time.
Prunty was who launched like Khris to the next level, and even Giannis leveled up in some ways too.
Prunty was the coach of a Bucks team that had no business taking that Celtics team to 7 games.
That's true.
It's very true.
A very strong offensive coach. And that's something he's always had a reputation for. A creative coach. You mentioned the play that he drew up that was notable in Bucks history. That is, I am right in saying, still in our Win in 6 intro, I believe. I think that one made the cut. I think it made the cut.
I can't remember.
The fact neither of us are sure probably isn't a great sign. Ty nodded. No. He probably listens to the podcast more than you or I.
I hope it is. I'm pretty sure it is. Apparently, he also helped draw one up, an alley-oop play that won them a Western Conference Finals game in Phoenix. So there's going to be a bunch of alley-oop plays, is what I'm hearing. Now that
yeah, the DeAndre Ayton,
Jay Crowder.
Yeah,
Jay Crowder. Yeah, well, the breadcrumbs are piling up here. Well, yeah,
Prunty also worth noting. I mean, his lineage is Spurs lineage, and again, if there's any recommendation from the Bucks staff, we know this remains important to them, and they would find one way or another because they seem to value that. So I mean, on that one, I'm actually quite happy to see Prunty back, and particularly in the kind of role he's going to be, and interesting for guys like Giannis and Khris, I guess, too, to have a full circle moment where Joe Prunty's back in the staff, but they're very different players and a very different team.
Yeah, and I think there's this idea that he's boring because he's been around for a while. If you're not a significant value add and well-liked, you're not going to be an NBA assistant coach for a long time, and on a lot of different staffs. It's not like he was on one guy's staff. He's coached for a lot of different coaches, some really good ones as well. And I just think, he's now been credited with drawing up a game-winning play 3 different places, clearly is adding even more offensively. And like you said, Adam, if he was the lead assistant, maybe I think that would probably be a little underwhelming, even if maybe it would be fine. I mean, we don't only know so much about this stuff, but Terry Stotts is the kind of name where you're like, oh, hell yeah, that's, was the Mavs offensive coordinator with Dirk and then coached the Blazers for so long, had so much success offensively. Prunty being another guy with him and just someone else on the bench, I think is outstanding. And I do kind of wonder if some of the negotiation and delay with salary, I wonder how much of the conversation was like, listen, your amount's not going to be great, but there's going to be a lot of spend on assistant coaching, especially these first few years of Adrian Griffin. Who knows? Who knows if that comes up with the coach or not? I do think if that was a dialogue, it was a smart one for Adrian Griffin because this is how you set yourself up for success. And as we've seen, if you have that success, then you get the new contract pretty quickly. John Horst's salary was kind of an NBA joke until they got good, and then he got the new contract pretty soon after that.
You're not wrong. I also think it's pretty scummy as a business practice.
Of course it is.
I can't really support it in any way. If you're the head coach, you should be making head coach money.
Well, he's not. It's just low end head coach money.
Yeah, well, the Bucks aren't a low end team.
It might be the lowest in the league.
Their Bucks aren't a low end team. The spending on their roster isn't low end, so the coach should be paid accordingly with the pressure that comes with the job. So if they want to have a top end assistant coaching staff, I think it's smart. Go do that. Guess what? Your coach's salaries do not go towards the salary cap. So you can go and pay whatever you're paying your roster, and you can, if you want to, pay your coach and pay your assistants. Like I'm not gonna dig in on that, but I would be reluctant to spin that as a positive because if Griffin is the guy and they've decided
didn't say it was a positive.
No, I'm not saying you're saying that. But I wouldn't give them any credit for that structure because if he's your guy and he's the best guy for the job, well, he should be paid as much as you would have paid any other candidate in your process because that's the money you had there. And it's not like if they got Nick Nurse and they decided Nick Nurse was the guy that they're going, oh, well, we can't afford Terry Stotts. We're not giving you Terry Stotts if you want him. So, yeah, that element of it just raises some eyebrows for me. Doesn't mean it all won't work out fine, but I don't know about that from Adrian Griffin's side of things. I don't like that idea because it was crappy when it happened to Horst. Understandable, particularly with how that search played out.
Yeah,
but it's like that's not the answer. Adrian Griffin is going to have more pressure on him than any head coach in the history of the Milwaukee Bucks. And if he's being paid considerably less than Mike Budenholzer was, that's not good. There's something wrong there.
Yeah. No, I echo all the senses of having an experienced staff around Griffin. Prunty, Stotts, down the line, they have interesting minds. Obviously, there's some carryover from Toronto with Mutombo coming to Milwaukee now, and some guys that have
Mitchell too was there.
Mitchell, yes, and some guys that have Stotts and Prunty have been coaches, but I'm not going to overlook DJ Baker or Bacher being a head coach of a G League team too, because it's a very different experience being the guy in the lead chair and having to make those decisions night in, night out.
His lineage is Dwayne Casey.
Mm-hmm.
So
okay.
So there may be some inside track. I'm trying to think of who else might have been, or even there were no holdovers from the Casey era. I don't know, but it is possible that there was someone, and I don't know. Word has been shared. It doesn't always work like that. I mean, it's kind of natural to try and connect dots and be like, okay, well, what exactly are they getting from this coach, and why is this coach on the staff? But that is a possibility in that case.
Yeah. That's right.
And then the other assistant coaching news, anime level betrayal. Charles Lee going to the Boston Celtics. Listen, to be clear, I get it.
Good for him.
Could he have done it anywhere else? Literally anywhere else? Any other team?
Why would he? I mean, the Bucks didn't give him a head coach job. The Pistons didn't give him a head coaching job. So you want to be a head coach? You're not going to be around as part of the new Bucks staff. Go get the best assistant coaching job you can get. So he's on a team that's going to be a contender. That's high profile. That has an erratic figure as head coach, and anything could happen there. Seriously?
Well, he's not the lead assistant.
Yeah,
I know, but
Sam Cassell.
No, I saw yesterday. I think Woj tweeted that.
Is he going to be the lead assistant? I know they brought in Cassell solely with the idea of giving Missoula the support or whatever.
And some results partners.
I have no ill will towards Charles Lee. I
don't either. It's where she went literally any other team. Would have been great.
I think it's different to, for example, when Ben Sullivan did it. which every time I see him in the green on the sidelines, I'd be like, God damn it, Ben Sullivan.
Pipeline.
How dare you?
How
dare you?
It's that he's trading that green 3/4 zip to a red one.
Ben Sullivan also, worth noting, I mean, was one of the coaches who skedaddled out of Boston, seemed pretty eager to not be a part of the Missoula staff in that exodus and kind of creating the opening. So I don't know if notes were compared there. I wish nothing but the best for Charles Lee and hope he's a head coach very, very soon.
I do too. I hope he's a head coach before the season starts. Anywhere else.
I think that ship has sailed. That's why he took that job.
Has. Clearly, yeah. I mean, it's unfortunate.
I wonder would he have been the Pistons coach if the next wave of events that led to not doing this out there, like
Jesus.
And honestly, the Bucks played their part in just stalling the market and making everything weird too, because the Pistons were so far advanced. They were down to their 3 finalists. He was one of them, and then all of a sudden, bang.
Well, the reporting was that the owner wasn't wowed, and I think everything about what happened with them screams an owner who was just like, I need a better name. We're not winning enough games.
I just can't understand any of it. I mean, Gores has not been an owner he's
ready.
I out of where? I mean, it's just out of the blue. It's like, what took you so long?
They've never been this bad for this long as he's owned the team. Probably, right? I mean, I think it's probably a little concerning that you're just losing people at this point.
I think
this is taking longer.
You're
than
right.
They
They're
wanted
less
to
bad
take.
though. Listen, I'm not going to make my Detroit Pistons win prediction for next season on this podcast. We'll save that for down.
Lottery was not good to them. Also, I think they're trying to ratchet up everything they can to be respectable again. That's felt very clear. Troy Weaver's kind of had a quietly hot seat for a while. It seems. I think they're after a lot of enthusiasm when he got hired on, and I don't know. It's kind of a weird vibe. I don't love how they're doing.
Well, I
right
mean,
now.
Also their best player was out for the year, considerably.
They're most exciting. I mean, Bojan might be better, but yeah, it's Cade was out.
It's just hard. I mean, it's hard to get things going when you strip it down to the studs.
Yeah, well, I mean,
like, let's go now. Let's go forward.
Yeah,
and then it's like
the Killian Hayes thing has been tough. I mean, that was the first high lotto pick of their new era, and he's just not very good, which is a hard way to start.
Yeah. But then
anyway,
they got the first pick.
I think we'll talk more Pistons probably after the offseason when we do one of those pods. I think that's probably enough on Detroit.
See, he's trying, Jordan. He's trying to pin this on us again.
I didn't.
He's trying to pretend it's us.
That's on me. I started talking about the Pistons.
I'll just say 3 words. Good luck, Chuck.
Before we move on from assistants, I just want to draw attention to what I drew attention to for both of you guys before we started, which is Patrick Mutombo is an incredible artist.
Yes.
Go check out his art. It's kind of a fun story and one that you should maybe get the head start on because this is probably going to be akin to, Pat Connaughton, baseball player. I guarantee we're going to get lots of broadcast pieces on this. There'll be articles about it. But I'm ready to, gobble all that up because his stuff is really good. And it's interesting. I can't think of too many assistant coaches,
Mike Dunlap. We just had Art. And the problem is this is going to be a lot harder to do a podcast segment on.
Oh, I don't know. I'm open to it. I mean, we could do he had an exhibition, so we can see how much is online. Jordan, what about Patrick Mutombo's painting of the week? I feel like there's like 30 to 40 weeks worth from what I've read.
I mean, I'm on board. I'm on board. I'm just saying I can see it now, like a Zora halftime interview with Patrick Mutombo, and she's like, "Okay, give me the broad strokes here. What do the Bucks need to do to?"
maybe you'll get that gig, Jordan.
Yeah, exactly.
Keep that going.
Hey, what is? This is a blank canvas of a game, right, Patrick?
There's a great article on Anscape on Patrick Mutombo's art, and I'd highly recommend it. It's what he does throughout the season. It's not just like, oh yeah, this is my hobby. Isn't this a nice picture, John? He's legit. So that's a kind of cool thing. And if we're gonna get someone with a passion from the arts from the Toronto Raptors, thank God it wasn't the guy with the guitar.
the guitar case. TBD on how much is actually even a guitar in that thing. But Philly's going to be fun to watch this year, as they always are. But do we have anything else about the Bucks to talk about? Javon Carter said no comment on his player option, according to Jim Ozarski of the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, which I'm going to assume opt out, but no comment from Javon, who not a wordy guy.
He threw the first pitch out at the Brewers game, the game that they got swept by the Oakland A's.
Not going to blame Javon. Not going to blame Javon.
I'm not going to either. He just happened to go to a game.
I haven't seen that pitch yet. But
I thought it was decent. I didn't watch it.
Was it
good?
It was decent.
Right.
They don't.
Uh-oh.
They don't put the video out. Is this what you're gonna get on?
They only show it from like off the home plate. I can't accurately.
Well, there's a reason for that, Jordan.
I understand. I am forgiving of all first pitches. It has to be truly abominable, like 50 Cent or Michael Carter Williams, to be like, that is awful.
I think I could have the worst
Bobby
one ever.
Portis' first pitch at a Brewers game was really bad.
I don't remember that because I didn't see the actual angle of that.
I think I would
even the
take
form. I could see the photos in my head, and you're like, "Oh my god, where is that ball releasing from?" It's just, it's not good.
I'm just saying, there's going to be one probably moment this offseason where I'm like, okay, what are some quirky things? And then it's.
I think you have one of those moments a day, Jordan.
Just what are some quirky things? That's going to be the moment you have.
I think he has that moment once a day, based on.
That's right.
What are you gonna do with the quirky things?
I don't know. Maybe talk about it for. We'll talk about like how we talk about Patrick Matumo's art.
Just ruminate on them. Jordan's meditation is just sitting in a room, legs crossed, thinking about quirky Bucks things.
Quirky
the
things.
Zoe Deschanel of podcasters. All about quirky.
All right. Well, I don't even have a pun or anything. That's the podcast. Thanks for listening. I'm gonna wrap before Jordan's quirky things start spewing out here. We have a long off season to go. The roster moves are coming up, but then after that, that's the sneaky part that takes forever. So we'll have a couple quirky pods in there. First pitch pod, that's just going to be Jordan, I think, on that pod, but we'll see. Thanks everyone for listening. You can find links to this and all of our other podcasts, Cruising for a Bruising. It's a great pod. I mean, the Brewers are not making it the most fun. It's a great pod. Adam,
I'd rather if you didn't make that noise after you said the name of my other podcast.
Well, it's about the Brewers. It's not about you guys. I gotta catch a full series and get on there soon. Thankfully, I was out of town for some of the athletic series. Saw it coming, but still. But check out Cruisin', check out Talk of the Tundra, Jordan's podcast with Newmock. Andrew Snyder is the other host on Cruise. This is not an Andrew Snyder shot. Andrew, you're not fired. You're doing great, buddy. But yeah, check us out, gspn.info. Subscribe wherever you're listening. 5 stars, rate, review. We really appreciate it. We will be back soon to talk more Bucks and, of course, Brewers and Packers and film on Make Time for This and other things as well. Rohan's the outro guy. Thanks for listening. Pod Random. Bye.